Welcome, everybody, to another live Peter Schiff Show podcast. And all of the action, or at least most of the action in the financial markets, obviously there's a lot of action, unfortunately, on a battlefield in Iran. But in the financial markets, the major reaction thus far has been in the oil market. Now, since my last podcast, which I did, I think Tuesday or Wednesday last week. By the way, hopefully everybody watched the Friday Schiff Gold market wrap, because I went over the jobs report in detail that came out on Friday. Normally I go over the jobs reports on my main podcast, but because it came out on the Friday that I did the Schiff Gold market wrap, I covered it there. So if you didn't see that, make sure and go to the Schiff Gold YouTube channel and watch it. It was a horrible report. I mean, we lost 92,000 jobs, and there were more downward revisions to prior months. In fact, I will talk a little bit about jobs later in the podcast when I talk about the speech that Donald Trump gave earlier today in Kentucky, where he bragged about how great the economy is. And, you know, when Donald Trump talks about the war, see, here's the problem. I wish I could give Trump the benefit of the doubt, but I can't, because Donald Trump lies so often about so much, including the whoppers he told today in Kentucky. How am I supposed to believe anything that he says about this war? I can't. You know, not that I want to believe what the Iranians say. I don't trust them either, but I don't trust Trump at all. And nobody else should. And it's not like the U.S. government has an excellent track record of being honest with Americans about Middle East wars, because they all lie. So Trump is obviously not the exception. He is the rule. He didn't drain the military swamp. He is making sure it is deeper and murkier than ever. But I want to start again talking about the oil market. So on Sunday night, oil prices shot up. Maybe it was one of the biggest one-day increases in the history of oil. Oil got up to above $119 a barrel. Huge, right? It started the year at about 55. So it had more than doubled on the year. Most of the gains, obviously, over the prior week, since we declared an unconstitutional war against Iran. But it was a huge move, because oil ended the week, I think, just about 90. And so it shot up from 90, 33%, like $30 a barrel. Now, the market started to reverse because news broke that countries all around the world were going to do a coordinated release of oil from their respective strategic petroleum reserves. And that hit the market. And so we got a lot of selling when that news came out. Now, obviously, the nations are trying to do what they can to try to bring oil prices down. But this is just a patch, because to the extent that they do this and they sell out their oil now, well, now what are they going to do? Right? What do you do when it's gone? Remember, the U.S. already has record low stocks in our strategic reserve, because we sold half while Biden was president. And the only emergency was the midterm elections were coming up. And so Biden wanted gas prices to be lower. And so we blew through half of our strategic reserves that we were supposed to have for an emergency. Now, you could say that this constitutes an emergency. Of course, we created the emergency, right? This is not something that just happened to us, like, just completely out of, left field here. This was a known consequence of an action that we took. We decided, or Trump decided, that he was going to go to war with Iran. He didn't have to do that. There was clearly no immediate threat to the United States from Iran. I mean, nothing had really changed. Again, in fact, if anything, the threat had been diminished because 6 or 7 months earlier, we completely obliterated their capacity for nuclear weapons. At least that's what Trump told us back then. So we were supposedly in a great position. So there was really no need for this war. But for whatever reason, Trump decided to launch it. Well, clearly, the fact that oil prices were going to go way up, well, that's just obviously that's going to happen. And, Trump has said, and all the Republicans got the memo, because if you listen to all the media outlets, they're all basically reading from the same script, just like the Democrats did, when they wanted to talk about Biden being sharp as a tack, right? And everybody said the same thing. Well, the Republicans are all saying the same thing now. They're all reading from the same script about how high oil prices are just a acceptable price to pay for the long-term benefit of getting rid of Iran, right? Or of extinguishing this threat that is overhanging the U.S. for, 40 or 50 years, right? So it's a small price to pay. So Trump is asking Americans to pay this price because of the long-term gain. So let's have some short-term pain and we'll get some long-term gain. What bothers me about that is that this is really unnecessary short-term pain. But if the president really believes that it's worth, taking some short-term pain to get long-term gain, why not apply that to where it really matters? Like cutting the deficit, cutting government spending, entitlements. How about some short-term pain there? How about the president telling people you're going to get a smaller check from the government? That's the short-term pain we need. We're going to have to cut some government spending, which may be painful to the people who are receiving that money, but in the long run, it's going to be great. Or how about allowing a recession that is necessary to purge the economy from these economic imbalances that are weighing it down? Why not have some short-term constructive pain so that we can have long-term gain? There are so many, ways that Americans could be asked to take some pain for some real gain. This one makes no sense because there is no real gain that we're going to have from this war. I doubt that anything substantive is going to be achieved. But I wish that Trump had the same attitude to solve real problems that he can solve instead of making up problems and then trying to solve those. We have enough real problems without having to make them up. And of course, the cost of the war is another one. And, when people are talking about whether the rising oil price, and by the way, oil's up at about another $5 this evening. So we're back in the 90s. We're almost $93 a barrel on oil. And yeah, we're going to take out that 119 high. I don't know when, but I think we're going to take it out. But oil was going to go up anyway. It's not going up just because of the war. It was going to go up even without the war. The war, though, is now a convenient scapegoat for oil price. But oil prices are certainly going to be a lot higher than they otherwise would have been. But you have a lot of people that want to say, okay, well, this is going to be inflationary. This is going to cause inflation. No, it's not. Rising prices don't cause inflation. Inflation causes prices to rise, but other things can cause prices to rise, like supply shortages, which is what we're going to have with oil. Now, if the government did nothing about it, if the Fed did nothing about it, oil prices would go up. Other prices that are heavily dependent on oil might go up, but other prices would go down because Americans would have less money to spend on other things because energy would be costing so much more. So oil prices would go up, other prices would go down. The overall price level would not be affected. What's going to cause the inflation is not oil prices going up. It is the monetary and fiscal policies that we are pursuing now and that we will pursue even more aggressively in the future because of higher oil prices. Because higher oil prices will act as a tax on the U.S. economy. They will weaken the economy. They will lead to a weaker labor market, even weaker than the one we got now. And yes, oil prices will show up in the CPI. Of course they will. They didn't show up in the CPI we got today, which was the February number, but they will show up big time in the CPI number we get in March. We get next month for March. But what's going to cause the inflation is the government. It's going to be Congress. It's going to be President Trump. It's going to be the Federal Reserve. They're going to be printing more money. We're going to be borrowing more money to pay for this war. And so that's going to cause the price of everything to go up, not just oil. Everything is going to get more expensive because of all the money we have to print to pay for the war and all the money we have to print, for everything else. But not only is the war going to be expensive, because Donald Trump came out and said that after we finish blowing up everything in Iran, we're going to build Iran back better than ever. We're going to make Iran great again. Now, I guess, Iran was great at some point. We're going to make it greater than ever. How much is that going to cost? And what kind of boondoggle is that going to be? Remember, whenever the government gets involved in something like construction projects, look at the big deal they're making about how much the Fed is spending on its building. Well, imagine how much more expensive, how much more money is going to be stolen if the U.S. starts paying to build stuff in Iran. It's going to cost us more to build it back up than it's costing us to destroy it. Although, once we finish blowing up all of our missiles, we have to order more, right? That's where the defense contractors are all ringing the cash register, right? They're as happy as could be, right? Because they're making a fortune off of this war, because every time a bomb blows up, that's another order to replace it with a bigger, more expensive one. But this is going to cost us a lot of money that we do not have, right? We have to borrow the money to pay for the war, and then we have to borrow the money to rebuild Iran. And that's going to cost a fortune. And it's going to be, another cesspool of corruption and graft and kickbacks. And, governments can't do anything efficiently, especially when it's that far away, right? If we can't even build or remodel the headquarters of the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C., right? If we can't even do that at a reasonable cost, how are we going to rebuild Iran, right? Not even close. And I think some of that rhetoric was causing problems, but would also cause problems in the oil market. Last week, Donald Trump said that there was no negotiations with Iran, that the war was going to continue until we got Iran's unconditional surrender. He said that on Friday. And I think that's part of the reason that the oil market went ballistic on Sunday, because if you take the president at his word, which nobody should ever do, you can never believe anything that Trump says. But the markets tend to react to what he says because that's all they've got. And so if Trump was being honest and he was going to hold out for the unconditional surrender, and unconditional surrender means that you surrender unconditionally. It basically means you throw yourself at the mercy of the victor, right? There's no terms, right? You don't get to negotiate. It's like, you're just whatever they want to do, you accept. They want you, America would have complete control over Iran. We could pick the new leader, the new government. We would do everything. They would do nothing. They would just say yes sir, no sir, right? We say jump, they say how high, right? Whatever we want, they have to agree. We're in complete control. Now, there's no way they were going to do that. Maybe eventually, but it would require a protracted war, probably a ground campaign, boots on the ground, a long occupation, right? That's what it's going to take to get that submission. Meanwhile, look, the Khomeini, Ayatollah's kid, is already the new supreme leader. That's like right in your face, Trump. So you get rid of one Ayatollah, now you got another one, right? He could be worse than his father. Now, obviously, he's probably pretty pissed about what happened to his father, right? There's probably a lot of people that are pissed about what happened to not just their fathers, their daughters and their sisters. People are pissed about all the girls that died at that school. But look, I would think that it would take a protracted war with troops in Iran to get the unconditional surrender of Iran. And I think the markets started to price that in on Sunday night. Anyway, I got a quick commercial. We got a break. We're coming right back, so don't go anywhere.